Hi folks, as promised, today we are moving on to something with a little bit of maths involved. It's called a genetic cross. The PowerPoint that I'm about to show you a part of is also attached to Show My Homework, so you can go through this as many times as you like. You can just look at the diagrams, or you can go through it step by step. It's completely up to you. Or you can just replay this video to hear me talk about it if you need to go over it again. So a genetic cross is what we have to do if we want to try and predict the characteristics that that some offspring are going to have. So if you've got two parents, they could be animals, they could be plants. Obviously humans are animals, so you could do this for humans as well. You know what characteristics your two human parents have, or your two animal parents have, or your two plants have. So you can, as you know what genes, you know what types of genes, what alleles they've got. You do something called a genetic cross, and that shows you all the different ways of mixing together those different alleles. And it can help you predict what characteristics the offspring are going to have. It's not always definite. It's a probability thing. So we'll have a little look at that now. This is an example of a completed Punnett square. So the tool that we use in order to do a genetic cross is called a Punnett square. This is a completed one, and it probably looks a bit confusing. There's all these letters all over the place. So let's start off with something a little bit simpler. So here we have two different kinds of pea pod. The pea pods are either green or yellow. The allele, so the different type of gene, the allele for being a green pea pod is dominant. So when we write down a dominant allele, we write it with a capital letter. The allele for being a yellow pea pod is recessive. So remember from last time, you need two recessive genes, two recessive types of a gene, two recessive alleles, in order to have that characteristic appear. If you've only got one dominant and one recessive, you'll have the dominant trait. You'll have the dominant characteristic. We always write alleles using the same letter, so we wouldn't do big G and little y for yellow, for instance. So if you were doing, what could we do? Let's say brown eyes and green eyes, you'd do capital B and lowercase b. You wouldn't do B for brown and G for green. If you've got, as you see here, so you've got green pod and yellow pod, because green is dominant, it gets to choose the letter and it gets the capital. If you had, I don't know, red flowers and blue flowers, if red was dominant, then you'd have capital R and little r for the blue flower. That's just a convention thing. So our particular green pea pod here, it has two dominant alleles. So it's got big G and big G. Our yellow pea pod here, because it's turned yellow, it must have two recessive alleles. Now, those two alleles can pair up differently in the offspring. So when your genes from one parent mix with the genes from the other parent, you might get a dominant gene and a recessive gene. Because you've got one dominant and one recessive in this case, the dominant's going to win, so that's going to produce a green pea pod. Just looking at this now, you might be able to predict what the rest of the pea pods could be. So if you want to, you can pause this for a sec, see if you can guess what they're going to be, and and then see if you've got it right. Carrying on, anyway, the next one is also going to be one dominant from here and one recessive from here. So you've got big G, little g. So it's going to be green. And same again, and same again. So the way this works is you just take the letters from each row and column and pair them up. Now, in this particular case, if you breed this type of pea pod with this type of pea pod, you're only going to get green peas. That's all you're ever going to get. So the chance of this producing green peas is 100%. The chance of it producing yellow peas is 0%. So let's try a different pair of parents now. This is only slightly different. We've still got the yellow pea pod from before. That's alleles have not changed, but our green one now, this might be one of the ones that were produced in the previous generation. So last time we had all these big G, little g's produced. We've maybe waited a year, and now we're breeding these plants that we've made to make some more for next year. So it's got big G for the dominant allele, being a green pea pod, and it's carrying, hidden in its genetic material, this recessive gene for being a yellow pea pod. Now, just looking at it, you wouldn't know that was there. It looks exactly the same as this pea pod here. And it's the same with people. It's the same with animals. It's the same with all sorts of creatures. Recessive alleles can hide. Blonde hair, for instance, is a recessive allele. So sometimes you get two parents with brown hair producing a child with blonde hair, or two parents with brown eyes producing a child with blue eyes, because a recessive blue-eyed or blonde-haired or yellow pea gene can hide in your genetic material and not be visible on your body or on your plant or on your animal. But anyway, let's do this again. The first two are going to be similar to what we had before, because we've still got this dominant gene here, this dominant allele, sorry, and our recessive allele from the yellow pea pod. So we get a mix of the two, big G and little g, big G and little g, so we still get some green pea pods. But because we've also got this recessive allele hiding in there, we get a couple of GGs. Little g's even. So we get some yellow peas coming out. And this, if this was a family, this is how you can sometimes have brothers and sisters with very different characteristics. So you might have brothers and sisters with red hair and brown hair, or brown hair and blonde hair, or blue eyes and brown eyes, and so on. You don't always have to have exactly the same mix of genes. But as you can see, we still needed two recessive alleles to get the yellow pea pod. Now then, this one I think is the most interesting one. This is kind of what I was talking about just a second ago, about genes hiding. We've got two parent peas here, and they both look green because they've got this dominant green allele, but both of them have got this hidden yellow pea allele as well. So to start off with, it's all looking really sensible. We've got two green peas. Of course they're going to produce more green peas. Now these two offspring are different in their genes, but they still look the same. So two dominant green alleles produces a green pea. One dominant and one recessive still produces a green pea. But in this situation, we've got a recessive here and a recessive here. We can get two recessives producing a little yellow pea. So this little yellow pea here has appeared, the pea appeared from two green peas. And this is what I was talking about with you sometimes getting a blonde-haired child being born to two brown-haired parents. and it's just showing, again, it's a probability thing. So we've got 1 in 4 chance of having this little yellow P appear. So 1 in 4 is the same as 25%, is the same as 0.25 as a decimal. The chance of having a green P is 75%, or 3/4. Just quickly going back to this one, that's obviously 50-50. 50%, half the chance, 0.5.